last 70 years, the world population has nearly tripled. And with that, consumer demands have skyrocketed. More people means more food, more water, more clothes, more everything. And with this mass production of products, there is a cost. Most of these resources needed in everyday life for the average consumer requires electricity in one way or another. And that electricity comes in the form of fossil fuels for the vast majority of people. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, atmospheric carbon dioxide quantity has risen at an overwhelmingly fast rate. This rapid increase in CO2 emissions has been directly linked to human activity from industrialization and urbanization. This phenomenon has been given the term climate change. Whether you choose to believe it or not, it is a well-recognized fact among scientists, and we can see the effects happening already. In this documentary, we will explore the effects and politics of global climate change and why it's important. This is a house on fire.
John F. Kennedy once observed that our problems are man-made, therefore they may be solved by man. The threat from climate change is serious, it is urgent, and it is growing. Our generation's response to this challenge will be judged by history. For if we fail to meet it boldly, swiftly, and together, we risk consigning future generations to an irreversible catastrophe.
We've known about climate change for decades. Exxon, actually, the oil company, it was in their eternal documents in the 60s, they were talking about the impacts of climate change. We're starting to reach a point where the effects will become irreversible. So if we continue to not do anything, we're going to see more of an increase in the annual temperature rising. It's something around 3 to 5 degrees we'll see in the end of the century, which again, that might not seem like a big number, but if you think about your body temperature, and if your body temperature rose 3 to 5 degrees continuously, it's deadly.
There at least is one thing for certain. That is, humans are the cause of this increase in carbon dioxide. Scientists now know that after the Industrial Revolution, the amount of CO2 shot up because of the increasing use of fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, and natural gas. When burned, these carbon-based fossil fuels release the CO2 compound into the air. This gas, and others, are known as greenhouse gases. They get their name from the way a greenhouse works. Heated photon particles travel through space from our star, the sun, and travel through the layers of the atmosphere before heating up the objects it touches. The ground, a plant, a table, and then that heat radiates and transfers to the air. But that air cannot escape the atmosphere, much like how it cannot escape the glass roof of a greenhouse. The average car emits 6 tons of carbon dioxide every year. 208 million vehicles were registered in the United States in 2016. That's an estimated 1.6 billion tons of CO2 every year in the United States alone. In 1 year, a single tree will be able to absorb 48 pounds of CO2. And there are approximately 3 trillion trees in the world, which means vehicles in the United States are producing CO2 even 22 times faster than all the trees in the world can convert the oxygen. That's not including China, India, Russia, or Japan, which also fall into the top 5 CO2 emitters in the world. Having a higher concentration of these greenhouse gases is able to trap more of this heat and therefore warm the planet. But it doesn't take much. Scientists predict the Earth only has to warm up a few degrees before we cannot turn back the clock.
Climate change affects poor people the most. If you think about the people down in Latin America, the people in Africa, the poor folks in India, they're affected the most. So they're the ones who are least likely to be able to escape to air-conditioned homes, the least likely to have fresh water, the least likely to be able to grow food in their dried up lands. So certainly it affects those with the least the most. Climate change is the drastic effects that we're seeing all around the world today.
Natural disasters and natural hazards will be increased by climate change, and that includes, for example, we see hurricanes, tornadoes,
fires all over the world. Sea levels are rising, the polar caps, glacier caps are melting.
flooding, food insecurity, issues with crops being depleted because of droughts and flooding, a loss of ice and ice sheets, so that's affecting different mammals like polar bears. The storms are allowed to be more intense and cause more damage on the land because they can travel more.
Climate change is affecting the entire world when you think in terms of the amount of people that are just moving up north alone, trying to escape the tremendous heat below the Rio Grande River here on the North American continent. It's affecting the way the farmers are not able to grow food, particularly in South America, in Africa.
The Anthropocene era is something that has been mentioned before, which is basically it's a geological time period that we are in now that suggests that humans are causing a mass extinction of different species.
So we're going to see over time a lot of people heading up north. My understanding, the citizens of Australia are really literally burning up. So it's having a big effect.
The big one we're seeing right now, and we're going to see if it continues, is food insecurity and water insecurity. So with a lot of the natural disasters, we're seeing a depletion in agricultural sources and things like that. That's going to be a big issue. We're seeing famines already.
Destroying the rainforest right now in order to make more money, in order to do more cattle grazing on that land. So there's a lot of industries involved in making sure that they can make a lot of money, and yet and still it has a big effect on the atmosphere, and not enough people seem to care.
In South Africa, there's this thing called Day Zero. So basically what that means is they are counting down the days till they run out of water. So water shortages are going to be a huge issue. We go through these natural cycles of warming and cooling, but what's happening now is evidence suggests that humans are causing these warming and cooling cycles to be more intense. The issue is that we're increasing those cycles. In general, in the atmosphere, we have a certain amount of different greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, methane, and they're natural, okay? But with different processes, such as the process of getting oil or different agricultural processes, we're increasing those compounds and those elements. So we're increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we're increasing the amount of methane in the atmosphere, and when that happens, we're trapping it. So we're trapping it in our part of the atmosphere, and when that happens, basically the temperature rises. So when we're talking about climate, we're talking about the pattern of weather throughout a long period versus weather is day to day.
What's holding us back is profits and greed. There's so much money in oil and gas, petroleum. There's so much money to be made. If you're a oil baron or an oil lobbyist, you don't want things to change.
I would say about 99% of scientists agree that climate change is real and it is happening, and it's because of humans. The 1% is often lobbyists. So for example, oil companies like Exxon have scientists who suggest other things, but that's because they are being paid by a certain company to kind of disprove climate change.
Politics play a huge role in the whole climate crisis debate because you may have noticed that some of the Democrats are pushing for what's called a Green New Deal, and the Republicans are pushing back very hard against that. and some Democrats saying that, we need to move slower. This is going to cost too much, while they spend billions on war. This idea of saving the planet, or maybe that there is a crisis on the planet, we need to just slow down and take our time and not bother the people who are fracking and making a lot of money.
Obviously, you need money, you need funding to kind of tackle these huge, complex issues. And when you're under an administration that doesn't believe that there are these issues, it's hard to get anything done. And we can see this globally. We can compare different countries and what's being done based on politics, based on who is, maybe the president, and essentially what's getting done, where the funding is coming from. So right now, there's not a lot getting done because we just don't have the funding right now under the current administration and current laws.
By the time this year's teenage generation reaches into their 80s, it is expected that up to 3 billion people could experience water shortages, 600 million would go hungry, a portion of New York City could be underwater, 3.5 billion people could be at risk for dengue fever, and currently very rare mosquito-borne illness that can cause internal bleeding, persistent vomiting, severe abdominal pain, fatigue, headache, nausea, rash, and that's just the start of it. Heat waves could cause heat-related deaths to reach over 5,000 per year, just in Australia alone. Coral reefs will be killed off as ocean acidification from excessive CO2 emissions are absorbed into the water. Thousands of species of animals will become endangered and eventually go extinct. The Arctic seas will be ice-free in the summertime, displacing animal species and flooding coastal cities, forcing out hundreds of thousands of people from their homes. Natural disasters such as wildfires, hurricanes, and tornadoes will become far more severe and far more common. Category 5 hurricanes will become less rare and will travel farther north as increased global temperatures allow for these stronger superstorms. The Midwest will see more flash flooding and higher precipitation. Wildfires will cause drought, and drought will cause wildfires, producing an endless spiral of destruction on the West Coast. And that's just when this year's younger generation grows old. We are 60 years away.
The Paris Climate Accord was reached under while President Obama was in office, which is since the United States has since withdrawn from the accord that was agreed to upon all of the nations of the world except for 2. The biggest thing is that the world came together and finally agreed on something, and I thought that was that was very unusual and very important in itself, that the world, with the exception, I think, of maybe 2 countries, one which since has signed on to the agreement, and of course the United States has since withdrawn from that agreement under Trump. But the idea was for the world to recognize that the climate issue was an emergency issue and that the world did need to act. And so whether or not they would act soon enough is a whole nother question. But again, the important thing was that the world finally came together. The entire world, except for 2 countries, said that this was the problem and we needed to do something about it.
So we have these acts and laws that are intact still to help us regulate things like pollutants that are in the air and water, but it's not enough. So for example, we have the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, which it's a good start, but it isn't enough, essentially. And unfortunately, under our current administration, these acts and these laws are under attack.
The Green New Deal is a very aggressive program that's been put forward by Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and another senator. And the idea is
recognizing climate change and knowing that it's an emergency and that it's urgent and that we need to do something about it.
It's reminiscent of the Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, which is a very ambitious plan. It calls for doing a lot with the infrastructure of the United States. It certainly will create a lot of jobs if there's the political will to put forward this idea. It calls for solar power, wind power, water power, hydropower. So it's a very ambitious plan, and I'd encourage people to look into it. There's plenty of information on the internet regarding the Green New Deal. Yeah, the correlation for the middle class or the working class, poor folks, versus the rich people, I think, is that we're more apt to not want to stay with the status quo. That we can see the need for change quicker, I think, than people who are well off. And when we say the rich, I think we should be specific and talk about the people who make a lot of money, the Exxon Mobil people, the Chevron oil people, the people who stand to gain by by us constantly drilling for oil and petroleum and digging for gas. So the rich are having a field day with the profits, whether it be through war or whether it be through selling gas at astronomical prices. Certainly, I don't know if you observed your utility bill lately, but in spite of rumors that the prices were going to go down, the rates keep going up. So the poor are going to have a heck of a time. The working class is going to have a heck of a time dealing with this crisis. And the rich are pretty much going to, turn their heads the other way because they can afford the higher prices. If you think in terms of a whole brand new paradigm, what is it going to take to switch from fossil fuels, from driving your car with gas to having your car run on a battery alone, or having your car run on maybe a solar panel in your hood that's going to make your car run for a few hours at a time. So the cost to save our planet is going to be a tremendous amount of money, but the real question is
the cost if we don't do anything, which we're already seeing. So essentially, before, economy and ecology just never work together. They're two opposites, right? But now what we're trying to do is do things such as sustainable development. So kind of moving those two ideas together. And with that, for example, if we want to talk about coral reefs. So if we want to restore the coral reefs in a certain area because we want protection from these natural disasters again, so we want to restore these areas. Restoring a coral reef could cost millions of dollars. And it just because when you're restoring an ecological system, it'll never be how it was before. It'll never reach its full potential. So I think it's important when we're talking about cost to think about the cost if we don't do anything.
And yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money, but it seems that we always have money for wars, and whenever it's a question of overbloated military budget, there's always money for that. But when it comes time to literally saving our planet, you have Republicans and some Democrats dragging their feet, because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to think out of the box. They don't want to believe that wind is a better way to provide electricity in your home rather than carbon emissions or carbon fuel.
Doing something about climate change is definitely worth it because of the detrimental effects if we don't do anything.
What if we don't spend the money to save our planet? Then no one will be around to talk about it anyway. I contend that us Homo sapiens may be the only species to write our own epitaph. I really hope it's not too late. I can't say. If it is too late, I want to be around to see it though, because I want to be able to hold my grandchildren and tell them, damn it, I tried, and other people tried, and we did try, and maybe we didn't try hard enough, maybe we didn't lobby hard enough, maybe we didn't march enough, maybe we didn't protest enough, maybe we didn't do enough to change the whole society soon enough. But the good news is the rest of the world seems to be ahead of the United States.
After the facts have been brought out, many climate change deniers transition to statements such as, well, there's nothing we can do to fix it. Statements like these cannot be further from the truth. It has become a well-recognized fact that climate change is at the fault of human activity, and that alone is proof that we are capable of turning back the clock if we apply ourselves correctly. There are so many jobs that can be created with pushing for greener forms of energy. The industry is rapidly growing, and now that there are far more jobs in solar and wind than there are in coal,
It's a very complex issue, and it takes, a lot of different perspectives. There is no one solution. A start is definitely switching from non-renewable resources to renewable resources is a good start.
A lot of methane gases are emitted to the atmosphere from cow waste, and so I would think that we must do a lot to do away with beef in particular. So I know people tend to frown about being vegetarians or vegans, but that certainly is one option.
Cutting carbon emissions is a good start. It's going to take a lot. There's a lot of different aspects. Climate change is very complex. There's a lot of different aspects to climate change.
The general public must educate itself. It must do the research for itself.
Looking at what are the solutions, and then also just practicing sustainable ideas. So, the little things do make a difference. Even if you don't think they are, they do make a difference. Nothing is too small of an act. So, whether you're shopping at a thrift store for clothes or you're, reusing bags and things like that, that definitely helps. These issues aren't just going to go away, they're going to get worse. So it's important to take action now.
Once doing the research, they must act. They must get involved with local organizations that are tied to national and international organizations, and certainly spread the word that do what you can to help save the planet. Vote, work, act, write, protest, boycott, whatever it's going to take. Mother Earth is going to be so fine without us. If in fact us Homo sapiens perish, Mother Earth is going to finally breathe a big sigh of relief. Can you think of a world where the gases aren't being poured into the atmosphere, and the skies are finally able to clear from all of the pollution, and the waters are able to rid themselves of all of this crap that we keep dumping into the water? So Mother Earth is going to be here. I'm just not so sure about us.
to turn back the clock, solving this issue starts with you. If we all work together, this can be fixed. But that means we need everyone on board. Stay up to date on the latest findings and statistics. Discuss the causes and effects with people around you. Live more sustainably by bringing reusable bags to the store. Recycle used products. Use less water and electricity. And probably most important of all, vote for politicians who also support this cause. There's a lot you can do to contribute. You just got to put in the effort.